You're listening to UtdPodcast, the official podcast of Man United Zone. Hello and welcome back to UtdPodcast. I hope everyone's staying safe and keeping well in these difficult times, but I wanted to start today with some good news. First of all, football seems to be coming back. The Bundesliga have said they're going to start to play games again from May the 16th, and hopefully England won't be too far behind. Now, clearly safety is the priority, so games are going to be played behind closed doors for the foreseeable future. And whilst it's not ideal, obviously I know a lot of people would have watched the last game away. That was played behind closed doors, and it just isn't the same really. But we've got to keep everyone safe, and hopefully closed doors football is better than no football. So hopefully we'll have it back. Hopefully we'll get to see Pogba, Rashford, Bruno all playing in the same team. And I really hope we can get everyone fit and firing before the start of next season and hopefully sneak back into the Champions League places and set ourselves up for a really big campaign next year. Now, on the podcast today, I've got a very special guest from the Atlantis Football YouTube channel. I've got Harry, and I'd like to welcome him to the podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, his channel will be linked. If you're on Spotify, then go onto YouTube after you finish the podcast and search for Atlantis Football. He's done some brilliant videos on lots of potential United targets, lots of footballers, and his tactical analysis is really very interesting. With that said, first of all, welcome Harry, and my first question to you is, how do you think Manchester United can improve going forward? Now, as our listeners will know, this is something we've talked about a lot on the podcast, and as far as I'm concerned, it's the central midfield role and the right wing that are the two priority areas. Now, up till now, when it's been unclear whether Pogba wants to stay or go, I've been saying that we need a creative defensive midfielder, a sort of playmaker in that role, the likes of Ruben Neves, to fill the role that Jorginho fills at Chelsea, what Fernandinho was doing at Manchester City for a while. Now though, with it looking like Pogba wants to stay, him and Bruno are very creative, so possibly just a destroyer type defensive mid could work for us. As far as the right wing spot's concerned, I think Jadon Sancho is clearly the top target, and as far as I'm concerned, I see that deal happening either this summer or very soon. Whether coronavirus slows it down, I don't know, but I think Jadon Sancho will come to Manchester United very soon. So yeah, that's my assessment of where United are at, and so, Harry, how do you think United can improve?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on the podcast, and regarding the question about that, where Manchester United need to improve, I have obviously done my series on my channel on the positions I think they should improve on and who I would bring in. But I think the main two positions, if I had to narrow it down, would definitely be in central midfield and also in that right wing position. I do also think that the left back position is a more pressing issue than people think. People look at Luke Shaw and say, well, he's a decent enough fullback. But I think once you have Wan-Bissaka on the other side, who isn't the best going forward, he's a good dribbler in the middle third, being able to get past a few players and move the ball into the attacking third. But in terms of his actual end product in the final third, he's nowhere near the level of someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold or Ricardo Pereira. So I think United do sort of need to overcompensate by having a more attacking left back than Wan-Bissaka. If you look at the left backs in the Premier League, you can see like Mendy, Chilwell, Robertson are all pretty good going forward in terms of their dribbling and their end product in the final third. But I think this is an area of Luke Shaw's game that he really lacks. He's a very good one-on-one defender positionally, which is why he excels when playing as a left-sided centre-back. But I think going forward, he doesn't have the same energy to push forward. When the ball is moved over to that left side, you want a full-back who can really dribble with it, inject pace into that left flank. Someone like Theo Hernandez, who I've suggested, would be a very good option. Even someone like Philip Max at Augsburg, who's not really a dribbler, but in terms of his crossing ability in the final third, he's much better than Luke Shaw. So I think that's definitely an area United should look to improve upon. Also in central midfield, they don't necessarily need a CDM as such, a defensive-minded midfielder. They need a creative player who can play in a deep-lying position. Someone like a Ruben Neves, the sort of position that Toni Kroos has played for Real Madrid, the ability to get the ball into the final third, play those incisive passes and create from deep. Because while McTominay and Fred and even Matic are decent defensive players in breaking up the play, they do lack that ability that someone like maybe a Rodri or a Jorginho have in terms of being able to create chances from that deeper position. So that's another area United should obviously look to improve. As with the right winger position, that is also probably is a pressing area. just because United were really looking dire there. But it's a Silva ball issue for me pretty easily. Jadon Sancho is the obvious person. So if you want to check out my full suggestions for who Manchester United should sign, I have a series on my channel, so you can always go over and watch that to hear a more in-depth view on who I think United should be signing.
It's a very interesting point on the left-back position and something we'll possibly come back to later on. But first of all, I want to talk about Sancho. Now, obviously on your channel you've got a brilliant video on Jadon Sancho that will be linked. But I want to sort of talk about why Sancho could be such a good fit for United. Now, clearly this season, it was him and Lionel Messi, the first two players in Europe's top 5 leagues to get into double figures for both goals and assists. And Sancho's been putting up great numbers all season. If you look at even just watching clips of his play at Dortmund, it's absolutely sensational at times. So what part of Sancho's game are you most excited to see, and which of his attributes do you think will make him the best fit for United?
So yeah, I think Sancho would be obviously a great fit for United. I think his main attribute that I like about him playing on the right side is his interplay on the right channel. If you look at Borussia Dortmund, he's very good at not just getting the ball on the right and dribbling past a few players, which someone like Wilfried Zaha was excellent at, but he has the ability as well, which Zaha doesn't, to sort of interact with players on that right-sided channel, which is good because Martial excels at this. When the ball's being played into him and he's back to goal, he's good at controlling the ball and just playing quick, simple passes into players to move the ball into the box. And I think he'd work well with players like Bruno Fernandes and Jadon Sancho, who excel when playing those quick one-touch passes around the box. So that's a reason why Sancho would obviously fit. Obviously, the fact that he's English and he's just 20 years old is obviously a massive bonus as well.
Now, something that I've talked about a lot, so regular listeners will know, and probably anyone who's sat anywhere near me at a game as well will probably know, because I don't stop going on about it, is during the Van Gaal era and the Mourinho era, United had a massive tendency to overload the left-hand side. When you've got players like Rashford, Martial, and Mata and Lingard playing on the right-hand side, all of them are more comfortable on the left-hand side. We've seen Pogba as well likes to drift over to the left. When Mata and Lingard, as I said, when they're playing on the right wing, they like to drift into the number 10 position. And when Rashford or Martial were playing striker, they would also drift over to the left. So what it meant was we had a massive overload on the left. And for years, we only had Antonio Valencia providing any width whatsoever on the right. And I still feel like this balance hasn't been addressed. And with Jadon Sancho, my main concern, obviously he's a terrific player, but something that does concern me is that he likes to come into the central areas and drift over to the left as well. If you look at his touch maps and heat maps, there's as much on the right as there is on the left. So what makes you think that he'll be more effective down the right and won't just further exacerbate this problem of overloading the left?
So Jadon Sancho does like to move into central positions, but I think he does this more when in the final third rather than doing this when United have possession. So if you look at someone like Juan Mata, he'll often, even when United have the ball in their own half, he'll look to move into central positions from that area, which is obviously a problem as it squeezes the pitch, allows the opposition to compact their shape. Jadon Sancho doesn't do this. If you look at him at Dortmund, when asked to, he can stretch the pitch because he's got the pace to run in behind his fullback, and it's only when the ball gets into the final third when he does look to move into more central positions. You could have Wan-Bissaka, even though I don't think he's exceptional going forward, his runs alone overlapping Sancho will aid him as it will drag defenders away, and so I don't think it's a massive issue that Sancho does like to move inside. I think he's more suited to playing on the right than someone like a Juan Mata would be at United, because of his pace and dribbling ability, which allows him to play more as a natural winger than Juan Mata or even Lingard would be able to do.
That is a very good point, very well explained, and you have convinced me on that one. Now, in terms of the system, Ole seems to adopt a 4-2-3-1 system. It seems to be his preferred option. There's a lot of room for interchanging and fluidity amongst those players. Now, Martial and Rashford, both of them, when they're left out on the right, even for 10 to 15 minutes, they can stop getting touches of the ball, the game can drift and it can slowly pass them by, and that can take them out of the game. And they find it really difficult to play their way back into the game. With this in mind, do you think Ole will stick with the 4-2-3-1 system going forward, or will he look to play maybe a 4-4-2 diamond system with both Martial and Rashford up top, using Jadon Sancho as a cam? Obviously that means Bruno will have to play a bit deeper. How do you see things going in future?
So in terms of the system, Solskjaer does seem to be wedded to this 4-2-3-1 shape. I would prefer them looking to do a move to a 4-3-3 shape if possible, but Solskjaer doesn't seem the type of manager to do that. He does, however, sort of interchange with the 4-4-2 diamond, and that could also work as well. You could have Sancho playing off the front two or even as a wide forward even. But I think his best position in that diamond shape would be playing off the front two with Martial and Rashford playing as wide forwards. He's a very good creator, and he isn't going to be extremely well suited to playing that role, but it's something he can learn to grow into with the right sort of coaching. I do think this would be a problem though with Bruno Fernandes, as I do see that position in the diamond shape as Bruno Fernandes' best position. So how that works with Sancho, whether Fernandes drops deeper, I don't know. But I do think the best, or what United have been playing to, the signings they've been making and pushing the side towards, does suit a 4-2-3-1. But obviously Solskjaer is going to be using a 5-3-2 shape in the big games, and a 4-4-2 diamond also when he looks to use Martial and Rashford as wide forwards.
Well, yeah, I think either way, Sancho gives Ole some tactical flexibility. He will be able to, as you say, grow into that role playing behind the two strikers if Ole goes with a diamond formation moving forward. What I would say, though, is on Bruno playing a bit deeper, as Scholesy said, the best players that will find the space. And if you ask some of the Sporting fans, they will argue that one of Bruno's best seasons was up to this point this season, when he's actually played not as a number 10, but a little bit deeper as an 8. So you could argue that Bruno will be perfectly fine as an 8, and I think that could be quite a potent midfield four, actually, with a potential signing, Pogba, Bruno and Jadon Sancho. Obviously, the last thing to note about Sancho is he's a very marketable signing. Giving him the number 7 shirt, it will boost United's shirt sales no end, so obviously Ed Woodward will be happy with that, and it's probably something he'll be factoring in when considering making the signing. Now, in terms of a defensive midfielder for United, on your channel you've suggested Wilfried Ndidi, and now I agree that a ball-winning defensive midfielder is needed. Obviously though, with Pogba and Bruno looking to stay, maybe the playmaking attributes are less important, and it's just winning the ball back and making simple passes that are required. So what of Ndidi's game, which of his attributes make you think he's a good fit for United then?
Yeah, so I suggested Ndidi with the view of improving upon Fred in some way. So I think a lot of Manchester United fans have got carried away with how good Fred is. I think he's a good player, but to think that he's on his own going to be good enough to compete with the likes of Manchester City's midfield and Liverpool's midfield is just ridiculous. If you look at Fred's stats, he isn't the best defensive player in terms of when he's faced with a one-on-one in the centre of the pitch, being able to break up the play. He's been dribbled past, I think, 3 times per game this season, whereas Ndidi is a monster in terms of these stats, interceptions and tackles. He's putting up the same sort of stats that N'Golo Kante was when he was at Leicester and Chelsea in that 2-year peak of his career. So Ndidi is really going to improve Manchester United's ability to win the ball back, not just high up the pitch, but also stopping counter-attacks, which I think a lot of United fans have been overlooking with playing Fred, Pogba and Bruno Fernandes in that position. I think a midfield of Ndidi and having Pogba and Fernandes in front of him, or even Ndidi with Pogba next to him, is going to be vastly improved upon than, say, with Fred there. Because I think a midfield of Fred, Pogba and Bruno Fernandes doesn't have the same defensive attributes in terms of making tackles and breaking up the play. And I think in big games, especially when you have a dominant midfield such as like a Leicester, where they have Maddison and Tielemans, or Manchester City where they have De Bruyne in that position, United are going to struggle if they want to play a more expansive game than they have this season, and they're playing with that sort of midfield. So I think Ndidi's ability, his interceptions and his tackling are what really attracted me. He's vastly superior in all those departments to any other defensive midfielder in the Premier League. So I think that's what really attracted me, because it's definitely the player that Manchester United need to put into that midfield alongside a deep lying creator, which obviously would be Pogba. But if Pogba does leave, they will obviously need to replace that creative output from those deep areas.
That is a very interesting point. In terms of Fred's individual game, he seems to have improved a lot this season, and I've been personally quite happy with how he's played. But the point you're raising is an interesting one. He's doing a job similar to what Carrick's been doing for a lot of years without any fuss. But Carrick was hitting better long range passes. He was much more creative than Fred's been. And defensively, I do see your point. Fred gets dribbled past a lot. And in one of his first few games, I can't remember which, but Gary Neville said afterwards that is what Fred is. He is a bulldog. He'll go into challenges, he'll bite, he'll dive in, and he won't win the ball all the time. And what United need when you're going to play with, if you're going to play with one defensive midfielder, is someone who wins the ball more often than not. And if they don't win the ball, they don't get dribbled past. That's why City and Liverpool have been so successful, because they concede so few goals on the counter-attack. Obviously, it's difficult to concede when you've got the ball in possession in the opponent's half, and it's difficult to concede. It was more easy to defend when you're massed ranks back. The difficult bit is obviously when you lose the ball high up the pitch, and if you've got a monster like Wilfried Ndidi or Fernandinho or Fabinho for Liverpool who's able to just put out fires, make tactical fouls where necessary, and slow down the play, you can really, really restrict the number of goals you concede and become a much better team as a result. Something else I'd say with Fred is it almost reminds me a bit of the Ander Herrera situation. At the end of last season, a lot of fans, and me included, were probably saying things like, why don't we just give him the money? He's one of our best players, he's been incredible for the past couple of seasons. But in actual fact, he's gone and we've not looked back. And to be honest, him leaving has actually been a massive boost to the club. We've been able to reset the wage culture. Rather than paying 200k a week for the likes of Herrera, we've been able to get Bruno, and it's rumoured he's on 70k a week. That's a complete reset of the culture at the club. It's what we needed. So whilst it seems stupid to get rid of Herrera and lose one of our best players, in actual fact, we've turned a corner and looked so much better as a result. So I wonder if the same thing would happen with Fred. Obviously, Wilfried Ndidi is studying at a university in Leicester. His family are in Leicester. I think it'll be tough to get him to move away from Leicester. But two other targets that have been suggested are Thomas Partey and Saul Niguez from Atletico Madrid. One reason I particularly like these two targets is, firstly, Atletico are known to sell anyone for the right price. And secondly, this may be even more true because they've just built a brand new stadium, and with the coronavirus crisis, they may be struggling a bit more for cash. So I think they're more realistic signings. How would you rate them in terms of their abilities?
Yeah, so Saul and Thomas Partey are two players that have attracted a lot of interest. I suggested a Manchester United move for Partey last summer, but now in terms of 2020, he would obviously be a cheaper option than Wilfried Ndidi. I think he's got a £43 million release clause, but Ndidi is a superior defensive player. The one area that Partey does excel in over Ndidi is definitely his dribbling and probably his long passing as well. But I think if United could pair Ndidi with a deep line creator, there wouldn't be such a massive issue as Ndidi alongside maybe a Ruben Neves or even a Paul Pogba as well would definitely solve that issue. But I would prefer Ndidi to Partey. But if Manchester United were to sign Partey, I think the only issue is his age. I think he's 26 or 27, which isn't really a problem at the moment. But if United want to be building for the future, signing someone like Ndidi, who's 22 or 23, is obviously going to be a better option in the long term. I think Saul, on the other hand, is one of the best central midfielders in the world. He's an all-round midfielder. His passing, his ability to create chances is, I'd say, better than Partey's. However, even though Atletico do have their new stadium, they aren't going to be forced to sell players. They seem to be well run and have a lot of financial capabilities. So not going to let these players go for cheap, especially Saul. He'll probably cost around 18 million if United can even convince him to make the move. So I think Saul is probably an unrealistic option, but Partey, I think he'd be a decent option, but I would prefer Ndidi overall. Just because of his age and just because of the defensive ability, which is something United do need. I think people overlook the need for a defensive-minded midfielder because of the sort of style of play Solskjaer has played in the big games where he's really sat back. But if United did play a more expansive style of play, pushing more players forward, pressing higher, then they would need a better defensive player than Fred is in that central midfield position.
Well, I agree. I think both Saul and Thomas Partey offer more in possession than Wilfried Ndidi. And as we saw at Anfield, they're adapted to playing in a counter-attacking team already. So that could make them easier and settle in more quickly at Manchester United. Obviously, with Saul, he's got fellow Spanish players at United. Thomas Partey as well, I think he would settle very quickly. Now, looking at the striker options, obviously Odion Ighalo's come in. He's been pretty good for United when he's played. He's also happy to not play every game because he knows Martial's probably a better number 9 than him. For me, I think that's really important because if Ole wants to persist with Martial in that number 9 role, given the relative youth of Martial, Greenwood and Rashford, I personally think if we were to sign another striker, if Ighalo left, it would need to be a more experienced striker that's happy to not play every game, because Martial's got to be the first option to be trusted, and I think Mason Greenwood should be his rotation if Sancho signs on the right wing. Obviously, if Sancho doesn't sign, then Greenwood's got a starting spot on the right, competing with Dan James. But if Ighalo were to leave, for me, I think a more experienced striker should come in because there's enough young players in this squad. An experienced striker with a lot of firepower could help guide the youngsters, and I think it will help gel the team together and move us towards the business end of the league a bit quicker. Now, in terms of a more experienced striker or a striker signing, who do you think United should sign then?
Yeah, so a lot of Manchester United fans are keen for Ighalo to stay, which I don't really get at all. I think that Manchester United have fallen into a small club mentality where if a player comes in and has a few good games, they're instantly a player they should be signing. I don't think Ighalo's even played that well. If you look at the goals he scored and the games he's played a couple of Europa League games. He played against Derby in the FA Cup and scored. These aren't really the standard that United are going to be looking for a striker. I think this is just willful ignorance from Manchester United fans who want to believe that Ighalo, the signing in January, is a great player and they've uncovered a player who's been discarded by the Premier League. But in reality, he's not a very good technical player. United definitely need to improve in that position. I think someone like Dries Mertens, who I suggested, would be a far better option than Ighalo. Ighalo's not even like a young striker who can improve. He's going to be come in and he's going to be on maybe a 2-year contract. If anything, I would rather play Mason Greenwood in that position. I don't think Ighalo should be signed. And I think Manchester United fans who are suggesting that he should be signed permanently have sort of fallen into this delusional small club mentality that you would find from like a West Ham. But if the way I judge it is Ighalo good enough to get into a Manchester City, a Liverpool side, a side pushing for the Premier League? He's not. You want a better backup forward than in Ighalo. And I think that's how Manchester United fans need to look, because what anyone says, people say, we've beat the big clubs. But in reality, United have been terrible this season. They've got a worse points record than David Moyes, which is saying something, because that season United were terrible and they had a worse squad. People will say that Moyes had a better side than Solskjaer does because they were Premier League champions. If you actually look into that squad, it was terrible. Just look at the midfield. Solskjaer has Pogba, even McTominay and Fred I'd say are a cut above Anderson and Cleverley, who are playing in that central midfield under Moyes. Jones and Smalling were the centre backs. I think they had Raphael at right back, an ageing Patrice Evra at left back. So this theory that Solskjaer's doing an amazing job and we just need to give him time is complete rubbish. And fans have sort of been tricked into this small club mentality again because we've beat a few sort of big teams. That seems to have satisfied a lot of fans. In reality, we are fifth, around the same level, around the same points even as Wolves and Sheffield United, which just says it all. And people shouldn't be fooled into thinking United have had a good season because of how bad the likes of Tottenham, Arsenal and Chelsea have been.
Wow, that was cutting. But I would say there are some aspects that I agree with, some aspects I don't. So in terms of the small club mentality thing, I think there are elements of that you can see in the way that the United fans have taken to Ashley Young and Antonio Valencia. Yes, they've had good games, but they shouldn't have been at the club anywhere near as long as they were. They failed as wingers. We moved them to full-back. They weren't great there for a while. And eventually, because they were the best option we had, and they had to start week in, week out, when they had a good game, we suddenly loved them again. And it gave them more time than they should have had at the club. You look at the whole Ander Herrera situation. We were begging. We were desperate for him to stay. And yes, he was a decent player for us. But as you say, he's not at the level of Manchester City or Liverpool. And to be honest, he's not that big a loss, and as we've shown now, we've been able to completely reset the culture and rebuild from the ground. And for me, that's why I think Solskjaer should stay, and I'll defend him on this because we've actually seen progress under him. In the same way that I thought we saw potential and progress under Van Gaal, he was promoting young players. He obviously the style of football was boring, but you could at least see a direction, unlike Mourinho where we see him to go backwards. But with Solskjaer, you can see he's completely reset the culture at the club. There is a really, really good crop of young players coming through. The likes of Mason Greenwood, Brandon Williams, Chong, Gomez, James Garner and Dylan Levitt, who haven't even had a look in yet for some reason. I do also agree that this season can't really be considered a success on balance because, we are, as you say, we're fifth in the league, and the other clubs that are sort of in and around that top four race have been absolutely woeful. Chelsea have been poor, Arsenal have been terrible, Tottenham have been terrible. We should be easily in that third place, if not challenging City for second, because let's be honest, this season, City haven't been that good at all. Obviously, in terms of the big games, Ole's done well in them. And I think his team selections and the way he's set up his team have more reflected the quality of the team and the players he's got available than anything else. It's like with Mourinho. He said he'd like to play more attacking, but he didn't have the players available to him to stop us conceding on the counter. And as it proved in his last season, he went out and set up the team in a more attacking fashion, and we came much lower in the league. We were doing much worse because of it, because we couldn't defend on the break. So I'll defend Ole on that one. I think he's doing the best he can. He's doing a decent job. And who's to say that if the season were to conclude, I don't think European competition will be able to finish that, admittedly. But if we were to have won the Europa League and possibly won one of the domestic cups, probably the FA Cup at this point, because, we're out of the League Cup, and it's finished, then I think that would be a successful season, you'd have to say. If we managed to sneak into the top four, win the Europa League and win the FA Cup, that's not a bad season, to be honest, given the position we're in and given the stage we're at in building a cycle with the squad. I think the most important thing to focus on for all fans at the moment is the process that's going on. You can see there is genuinely a very high quality squad coming through. There's a lot of good players. Yes, there's things I disagree with. I think, for example, Lindelof would be a fantastic defender in La Liga, but I think the Premier League, I'm just not sure he's good enough in terms of his physicality. But he is getting better and beginning to prove me wrong a little bit on that. But it's only little things like that. Overall, the team is going in the right direction. And I don't think it's small club mentality to be excited by the prospect of what this group can achieve. Now, with that said, thank you, Harry, for your insight and your very informative opinions on this podcast today. And I'd like to encourage all our listeners to go check out the Atlantis Football YouTube channel. You'll be able to see plenty more from Harry, great videos on loads of potential transfer targets for United, different tactical bits of insight and all of that. It's been great to have you on, Harry. Thank you very much. And to all our fans, stay safe, and hopefully United and football will be back soon. Until next time, thank you for listening.